Real Estate Contracts Act. Bill is reported to the Committee on General Laws with amendment nature of a substitute.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to. Delegate Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, Senate Bill 1449 creates the Virginia Residential Executory Real Estate Contracts Act, which is a very fancy way of saying rent-to-own and similar type of arrangements. The bill includes basic consumer protections for these contracts and then directs the Board of Housing and Community Development to develop a model contract document. This is a recommendation of the Virginia Housing Commission. The substitute was simply technical, and I would move that we pass the bill.
Continuing with the block on page 12 of the printed calendar, Senate Bill 1450 is a measure to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the eviction diversion. Continuing with the calendar, when last we met, page 19 of the printed calendar, next category, Senate bills on third reading regular, approximately 24 or so in this category. Bottom of page 19, Senate Bill 1012 has been re-referred to the Committee on Militia, Police, and Public Safety. So therefore, turning to page 20, first bill, Senate Bill's third reading, regular calendar, is Senate Bill 1026. It is a measure to amend and reenact various portions of the Code of Virginia relating to absentee voting, no excuse in person, beginning on the second Saturday immediately preceding election. The bill is reported from the Committee on Committee on Privileges and Elections with amendments.
Delegate from Montgomery, Delegate Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Committee amendments are agreed to. Delegate Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 1026 is very similar to the House bill that passed out of here, dealing with absentee, no excuse voting. It was the same as mine, except it had two reenactment clauses. One, it would not take effect for this year's election, and the other would have to be reenacted next year through the House of Delegates and the General Assembly. Hope it's the pleasure of the body to pass the bill. Delegate
from Fairfax, Delegate Sickles.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman resume the floor for a question?
Would the delegate yield for a question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks, Mr. Judge. I'd like to ask the gentleman just to clarify the amendments that we passed on voice vote. Those conform the bill to your bill?
Mr. Speaker, I would tell the delegate that my bill actually has been conformed to Senator Spruill's bill with the two reenactment clauses, the delayed enactment and the reenactment for next year. The other amendments were technical in nature, asked for by the registrars.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further question?
Delegate yield for another question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate yields.
Just could you give the body a short explanation of what the bill does now?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, it does the same thing that my bill did. It allows the, early voting the second Saturday during daylight hours in person with a ID. It doesn't change any of those parameters, but it does allow you to vote early.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 89, noes 10.
Ayes 89, noes 10. The bill passes.
Senate Bill 1048 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to the purchase of handguns or other weapons, auxiliary law enforcement officers. The bill is reported to the Committee on Militia, Police, and Public Safety.
Delegate from Lunenburg, Delegate Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Senate Bill 1048 eliminates the requirement that a sheriff or local police department seek written authorization or approval from the local governing body before allowing an auxiliary law enforcement officer with more than 10 years of service to purchase a service handgun issued to him by the agency at a price that is equivalent to or less than fair market value. I move we pass the House bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 97, noes 1.
Ayes 97, noes 1. The bill passes.
Senate Bill 1087 is a measure to amend and reenact 3 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to election districts, requirements for precincts, remedying split precincts. Bills Board Committee for Privileges and Elections, Committee on Privileges and Elections with a substitute.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor?
Mr. Speaker.
I'm sorry. Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before we vote on committee substitute, could the gentleman explain what the substitute does?
Would the delegate yield for a question?
I yield.
Thank you, Mr.
Delegate
Speaker.
yields.
I apologize.
All right, Mr. Speaker, what it would do is allow the General Assembly to make technical adjustments to the districts for the sole purpose of reducing split precincts.
Further question, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate yield for another
I
question.
yield.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman tell us, would this, if we pass this bill, would his constitutional amendment then be moot?
Mr. Speaker, I would say no. What I'm trying to do is keep a vehicle alive to deal with the issue of split precincts in the event that my constitutional amendment does not pass.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One last question.
Delegate yield for another question.
I yield.
Delegate yields.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the gentleman, the same senator has another bill with regard to precinct lines, and that bill is, would you agree, is not this bill?
I think that's probably
Mr. Speaker, let me reword that bill. No,
It's
okay.
magic if you can do it the other way.
That was okay. That was an easy question, Mr. Speaker. Further question. Okay.
Delegate yield for another question.
Okay. Would the gentleman indulge me and explain what the other bill does that the senator has that deals with remedying precinct lines? Just, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, would I be correct that it would not be proper to entertain questions
I
about a
withdraw
piece
the
of
question.
legislation not before us?
I withdraw the question. Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to figure out how to know what's in this bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Well,
I think Delegate Cole will yield to the question to tell you what's in the bill.
Yeah.
Delegate Cole.
I'll give further explanation if the gentleman would like. The bill that came over is, from the Senate is one that we've seen before, where it basically tells the localities that, hey, split precincts are your all's problems. You all need to make sure that you don't have any split precincts in the legislative or congressional districts. That places all the burden on the localities. I believe it is totally unworkable because localities, given the gentleman's interpretation of the Constitution, localities are not authorized to make changes to districts after the fact any more than we are. And so what you would end up, if you pass the bill as passed the Senate, you would make our elections much more expensive because you would force localities to have numerous very small precincts and voting locations in order to avoid having split precincts. So I think it would be costly and unworkable. What the substitute does, it's similar to legislation that we have passed it before that the other side has opposed, that simply authorizes the General Assembly to make changes, as we traditionally have done in the past, to reduce split precincts after the fact, and solely for the purpose of reducing split precincts. So again, I moved the substitute.
We're on the question. Delegate Sickles, Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sickles. Would you like to speak to the substitute?
yes, speak to the motion at the appropriate time.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The way I remember this, ladies and gentlemen, is that the bill that came over from Senator Obenshain had no issue with regard to the constitutionality of doing a redistricting in between the 10-year period the Constitution requires. I would like to correct my friend from from Spotsylvania in that, or Stafford, in that it was not my opinion that that's unconstitutional. It was a circuit court opinion of one of our circuits that says it's unconstitutional, and that is one reason that the previous governor has vetoed this measure. But in the earlier version, I had no problem with it. I can't remember, Mr. Speaker, I admit it, whether I voted for this substitute or not, but I am going to vote against this substitute at this point and see what happens in the future. Thank you.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. Not enough for the ayes and nays. Division. All those in favor of the substitute shall raise their right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Substitute is adopted. Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 52, noes 46.
Ayes 52, noes 46. Bill passes.
Did you get it? Mm-hmm. Next up is Senate Bill 1156, which would amend the Code of Virginia relating to sanctuary policies. The bill is reported to the Committee on County, Cities, and Towns with an amendment.
The delegate from Franklin, Delegate Poindexter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would move the committee amendment.
Delegate Simon, do you want to talk on the committee amendment or on the bill?
Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at the system. I think there's a floor amendment also. Am I misreading that in LIS? No floor amendment?
All I see is the committee amendment.
Yes, I'd like to speak to the, well, yes, before we get to the amendment, I'd like to, would the gentleman yield for a question?
The delegate yield for a question on the amendment, on the committee amendment.
I yield, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate yields.
Actually, we can do the amendment first, Mr. Speaker.
You want me to adopt that?
Okay.
Motion's on the committee amendment. All those in favor of adopting the committee amendment will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. That committee amendment is adopted. Will you yield for a question from Delegate Simon on the?
I yield.
Okay, delegate yields.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the gentleman, this bill is not identical to your House Bill 2270, but it's very similar. Is that right?
I would say to the gentleman they're similar.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask the gentleman, this bill did not
Delegate would like to ask another question.
The gentleman yield for an additional question?
Delegate yield for another question.
I yield, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate yields.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask the gentleman, this bill did not go through the vetting process in militia, police, and public safety, where we generally hear bills that affect sheriff's offices and law enforcement and so those sorts of things. And it also did not get to be heard by courts of justice, which his bill was. Does the gentleman have any idea why it was that this only went through county, cities, and towns and not those other committees?
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd say to the gentleman the bill was simply assigned to the committee and it went to the subcommittee and the committee added the amendment and the bill's on the floor now.
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this bill deals with issues of what law enforcement agencies can and can't do. It has to do with prohibiting a practice whereby they would be liable for enacting policies that may have the intention of being counter to federal policies on immigration. I don't know that these issues have really been thoroughly looked at, that the words have been carefully considered the way we were able to consider the gentleman's bill when it came through the House in both the Militia Police and the Courts Committee. And so for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I would move that the bill be re-referred.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Delegate from Shenandoah.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Delegate has the
I
floor.
believe the gentleman was arguing and is now making a motion. I don't believe that's in order.
You're talking to your motion, I take it.
Speaking to my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate has the floor.
Okay, so as I was saying, speaking to the motion, Mr. Speaker, would be that we refer this bill to the Committee on Militia, Police, and Public Safety. And speaking to that bill, for the reasons I previously had laid out, this bill deals with issues that I think are significant to how sheriff's offices and federal law enforcement cooperate. The gentleman's bill, which had different words in it, was carefully considered by both Militia, Police, and Public Safety and the Courts Committee. This bill hasn't had that opportunity to be vetted by the folks that are sort of have that subject matter expertise. And so I think it would benefit the whole body if this bill had the opportunity to be viewed by the appropriate committees that have subject matter. So that's the purpose of the motion, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Franklin, Delegate Poindexter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the body, I would oppose any move of the bill back to subcommittee. County, cities, and towns addresses issues with towns, cities, counties, policies, sheriffs, law enforcement, etc. So I would oppose any move to that bill.
Delegate from Arlington, Delegate Lopez, speaking to the motion to re-refer to Militia and Police and Public Safety.
Oh, not move it at a later time, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, the motion by Delegate Simon is to refer the bill to the Militia, Police, and Public Safety Committee. All those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The noes have it. The bill is still before us. Okay. The ayes and nays, they're sufficient. Shall the bill be referred to the Committee on Militia, Police, and Public Safety? Clerk will close the floor.
Ayes 48, noes 51.
Ayes 48, noes 51. That motion is defeated. Delegate from Franklin, Delegate Poindexter.
Describe the bill, Mr. Speaker. Ross, describe the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
The language in this bill is somewhat different from a couple of years ago, but it goes through the same general tone. I'll read the language. No locality shall adopt any ordinance, procedure, or policy intended to restrict the enforcement of federal immigration laws. You'll note that that does not mandate any affirmative collaboration with ICE. And what it really does, though, it prohibits localities from affirmatively acting to impede the enforcement of federal immigration laws. And I would note that we have law enforcement coordination across the board, as has been described in other times on this floor. Mr. Speaker, this is an appropriate bill for Virginia, and I move the bill pass.
Delegate from Arlington, Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Speaker. Here we go again. Here we go again. Yeah. This bill ignores the complicated nature of federal immigration law and requires localities to choose between complying with their ICE detainer or unlawfully detaining someone past their release days. We humbly disagree on 287G agreements that are voluntary currently. This bill, we believe, would make them mandatory. This bill makes our communities less safe by undermining the community policing efforts that we pride ourselves on and work so hard to build. This bill, for so many communities with large immigrant and new American populations, makes it harder to support community policing efforts that build trust between police and the community. Just in my district alone, in 2017, the first 8 months of 2017, 75% decrease in the number of domestic violence reports in immigrant and new American communities, 85% decrease in the number of sexual violence reports from immigrant and new American communities. Are these things not happening? No, of course they're happening, but people are too scared to report them to the local police because they might get caught up in the ICE detention process. The combination of the Dillon Rule and existing state mandates and make the existence of sanctuary localities, which we keep hearing about from the other side of the aisle, a legal impossibility in the Commonwealth. The burden of the federal enforcement agency should not be placed on local jurisdictions. Forcing localities to act as a substitute for federal agents places additional and undue demands on resources. taking time and resources away from police and that should be spent on public safety and enforcement. Also, ICE usually does not reimburse localities for holding individuals past when they otherwise would be released. Ultimately, we all know that this bill is unnecessary, costly localities, and could make us less safe by undermining our community policing efforts. Let's be clear. Let's be very clear. This bill is really about dog whistle politics, created to stoke fear of the other and division and the idea that those who are different, new Americans and immigrants, well, you're unwelcome. This kind of legislation doesn't create one job or educate one child or help a family in any way. It will drain money from our localities and send the worst kind of message about Virginia. Please vote no.
Delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Yaris.
Mr. Speaker, speak to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
I've not spoken up on much legislation, but I felt the compelled need to speak on this, partially because when I hear terms like dog whistle politics, it affects me greatly. My favorite thing to do as a delegate, Mr. Speaker, is several times a year I go to the federal courthouse in Norfolk and I speak to a naturalization ceremony. And I tell these folks that it is the greatest honor of my life to be the first to welcome them into our American family. My earliest childhood memory was as a child seeing my mother take that oath of allegiance. And that is an incredibly powerful moment. For those that don't know, when you stand in that courthouse and you say these words, I hereby declare an oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have hereto been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law, that I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by law, that I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by law, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, so help me God. I have stood in that courthouse several times, and it is one of the most profound moments to see these new members of the new American family. It's the last thing they do. How moving and how powerful it is. And I have seen U.S. attorneys remove people from that body who will not recite that oath. It is an incredibly powerful moment. We allow, as a country, 1 million legal immigrants a year. 1 million. There is not a country on this planet that allows that number of illegal immigrants a year. We are a nation of second chances. That's part of who we are. And I am a firm believer in being that second chance, but I also am a firm believer in being a nation of laws and not men. And I have to say that when I hear terms like dog whistle politics, when this simply is telling localities not to impede the federal government from obeying the law, that to me is astonishing. As somebody who is a child of an immigrant, who every chance I get goes to speak at a naturalization ceremony, I have to say, I completely reject that characterization of this bill, and it's the pleasure of the House to pass the measure.
Delegate from Alexandria, Douglas Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is indeed a moving account my friend from Virginia Beach has given. And I agree, we are a nation of immigrants, and those are very powerful moments. The question, though, is on this legislation. And the question is, the legislation says that it prohibits localities from intending to restrict the enforcement of federal immigration law. Can localities restrict federal immigration law? Well, the Constitution of the United States, Article 6, Clause 2, says the Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuant thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So can a locality overturn or restrict federal law? They can't. So the bill clearly isn't needed, as well as being unwise. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate has the floor.
Speaking most specifically, Mr. Speaker, to the implication, frankly, that many of us have grown tired of, that just because we favor something as simple and clear as the rule of law, that we are racist. And that is what was just uttered on this floor with the term dog whistle politics. For the last week, we have heard, by implication, suggestions that we are racist in some respect or another. And I am tired of it, Mr. Speaker. And if our friends in the Democratic caucus want to talk about racism, they need to clean up their own house first. And we're waiting for you to do that.
Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, I move the pending question.
Delegate Orrock moves the pending question. As many as favor that motion will say aye. All those opposed, no. That motion carries. Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 51, noes 47.
Ayes 51, noes 47. The bill passes.
Turn to page 22, continuing with the category Senate bills on third reading regular. Next up is Senate Bill 1179, a measure to amend and reenact Section of the Code of Virginia relating to application for a resident concealed handgun permit, United States Armed Forces. The bill is reported from the Committee on Militia, Police, and Public Safety.
Delegate from Lunenburg, Delegate Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, Senate Bill 1179 is a bill that clarifies that a member of the United States Armed Forces who is stationed outside of the Commonwealth but domiciled in the Commonwealth may apply for a resident concealed handgun permit. I move the House pass the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 95, noes 3.
Ayes 95, noes 3. The bill passes.
Senate Bill 1207 is a measure to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia related to school protection officers, minimum training standards, exemption. The bill is reported to the Committee on Militia, Police, and Public Safety.
Delegate from Stafford, Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 1207 is identical to House Bill 2142, which passed this House in a bipartisan manner. I move passage of the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 44, noes 46.
Ayes 44, noes 46. The bill fails to pass.
Mr. Speaker, next up, Senate Bill 1346, which is a measure to amend and reenact Section of the Code of Virginia relating to electric cooperatives rates. The bill is reported from the Committee on Commerce and Labor. Senate Bill 1346 came out of Commerce and Labor relating to electric cooperatives.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate
Mr.
Hugo.
Speaker, may this go by temporarily?
Delegate Hugo moves that the bill go by temporarily. All those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The bill goes by temporarily.
Mr. Speaker, on page 23 of the printed calendar, Senate Bill 1444 has been taken by for the day. Therefore, turning to page 24 of the printed calendar, bill before us next is Senate Bill 1455, measure to amend and reenact three sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the State Board of Elections, membership, appointment of the Commissioner of Elections. Bill is reported to the Committee on Privileges and Elections with an amendment nature of the substitute.
Delegate from Westmoreland, Delegate Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Committee substitute is agreed to. Delegate Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The committee substitute is now identical to House Bill 1620, And 1620 increases the membership of the State Board of Elections from 3 members to 6 members. Those members are appointed by the governor, 3 of each party. No 2 board members may reside in the same congressional district. The bill also will grant the board the authority to appoint and remove the commissioner. I would ask the passage of this bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 51, noes 48.
Ayes 51, noes 48. The bill passes.
Senate Bill 1564 is a measure to direct the State Board of Elections to revise its regulations for reviewing and processing candidate petitions. The bill is reported to Committee on Privileges and Elections.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me say that Senate Bill 1564 is not another bill that the senator has carried. This deals with directing the State Board of Elections to review and revise its processes and regulations for reviewing candidate petitions. Such revisions shall provide a process for checking petition signatures that includes a method for determining if a signature belongs to the individual who is registered. The process shall provide for tracking of such information associated with each petition for the in case the case is escalated to a fraud situation. The bill requires the State Board to revise its processes and associated regulations before January 1st of 2020. I move its passage.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 78, noes 20.
78, noes 20. The bill passes.
Senate Bill 1579 is a measure to amend the Code of Virginia relating to standards and criteria for congressional and state legislative districts. Bill is reported from the Committee on Privileges and Elections.
The delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 1579 provides criteria by which congressional and state legislative districts are to be drawn, including equal population, racial and ethnic fairness, respect for existing political boundaries, contiguity, compactness, and communities of interest. The criteria set out would be applied to those districts that would be drawn following the 2020 census, and I move its passage.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 53, noes 46.
Ayes 53, noes 46. The bill passes.
Turning to page 25, printed calendar, continuing Senate Bill's third reading regular. Senate Bill 1674 is before the body, which would amend the Code of Virginia relating to health insurance, short-term, limited duration health plans, guaranteed options. Bill is reported from Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, Senate Bill 1674 allows short-term, limited duration health plans to offer a guaranteed option that would include limited duration health plans at a future date without re-underwriting, and it would also specify that guaranteed option is not a health benefit plan and that any guaranteed option may set a specified premium for any short-term limited duration health plan. Hope it be the pleasure of the House to pass the bill.
Shall the bill pass?
Mr. Speaker.
Clerk will destroy the roll. Delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Descant.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I had my light on, but
didn't come up that far.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. There have been a lot of us over the last several years who have struggled mightily with trying to figure out a better way to get health insurance benefits provided to more people at lower cost. And in this session, there were a number of us who had bills that actually passed the body that I believe will help us in some ways get to that goal. Unfortunately, I'm not sure this one actually will do that, and let me tell you why. these kinds of plans, on the face of them, they look very attractive. They look like they give people more choice, they give more options for folks. But when you look at it very carefully, and when you look at it in the context of the health insurance industry in general, they create huge problems. The biggest problem they create is that they tend to pull healthy people out of the health insurance pool, because those are the people who usually want to opt for high deductible plans that have minimum benefits. As a result, what happens is those who are left in the pool are less healthy, generally older, sicker, and therefore more costly to insure. Now, if you're an insurance company and you're thinking about risk and thinking about reducing your risk and accommodating your risk through premiums, you're saying to yourself, what are you going to do with those people who are now out of the pool? Instead, I've got to insure these sicker people. They cost more, and therefore, I'm going to have to charge higher premiums. So ironically, in the desire to bring down premiums, what this bill would do would raise premiums in the pools that are left behind. Now, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, the reason I'm speaking on this bill now is because we know this bill is probably coming back here again, and we're going to deal with this bill, these types of bills over and over again. And so we ought to be understanding how they work. Now, the other problem with this kind of bill is what we refer to as the problem with the so-called skinny plans. Some people call them sham plans, but whatever you call them, it is clear that these plans tend to offer less in terms of benefits than the benefits that are out there on the exchange. And that makes sense, too, because people are paying lower costs for the plans. Now, the Kaiser Family Foundation recently did a study in 2018, and they found 15 of these kind of plans in Richmond already. And what was interesting is when they evaluated the plans, here's what they found. None of the plans offered maternity benefits. Only 20% of the plans offered prescription benefits. Only 40% of the plans allowed you to deal with a substance abuse problem if you needed to. The key is here, pre-existing conditions were not covered by the plans. Now, I've got one of these plans here, and the plans admittedly say, we don't cover all these things. But the only way you can find that is if you look in the inconspicuous type at the end that requires me and the delegate from Lynchburg to use our glasses as we look at the plans. So if this is what you want to create, an insurance pool that doesn't make sense and raises premiums for those people who are sicker, and a pool of relatively healthy people who don't have the kind of benefits that they could otherwise have, then you vote for this bill. But if you want an insurance market that really works for the broadest cross-section of the population, you should defeat this bill. I hope you will vote no.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
And Mr. Speaker, what we ought to be about is allowing people to choose what plan they want. And if they feel that a short-term policy is better for their family, that's what we ought to be about. And this is one more option in that tool shed that they can have. So I think it's a good bill. Is it a perfect bill? No, but it's an option for those families out there who need short-term insurance. Hope it be the pleasure of the House to pass the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 51, noes 48.
Ayes 51, noes 48. The bill passes.
Next up is Senate Bill 1689, measure to amend and reenact multiple sections of the Code of Virginia, all relating to group health benefit plans, sponsoring associations, the formation of a benefits consortium. The bill was reported from the Committee on Commerce and Labor with amendments.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I'll move that we adopt the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The committee amendments are agreed to. Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, Senate Bill 1689 is similar to Delegate Wilt's bill, House Bill 2443, where we allow non-stock corporations and other associations with at least 5 members to provide health benefits. Also, the bill provides that any trust that they set up is subject to the Federal Employee Retirement Income Security Act and U.S. Department of Labor regulations applicable acts to multiple employer welfare arrangements. Hope it be the pleasure of the House to pass the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 61, noes 38.
Ayes 61, noes 38. The bill passes.
Turn to page 26. Next up is Senate Bill 1759, measure to establish a pilot program to place electric distribution lines underground in areas of transit-oriented development in certain localities. Bill is before the Committee on Commerce and Labor with amendments. And, Mr. Speaker, there is a floor substitute offered by Delegate Kilgore.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask that we adopt the reject the Senate. I believe we reject the Commerce and Labor Committee amendments. I'd ask that we reject those.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Yeah, the delegate from Roanoke, City Delegate Rasool.
Mr. Speaker, would it be appropriate to ask, will the gentleman rise for a question?
Yes. Delegate yield for a question.
I yield, yes.
Delegate yields.
Mr. Speaker, could the gentleman explain the difference between the committee amendments and then the future floor substitute that we're going to have to vote on?
I would explain that basically what we did in committee, Senator Servell forgot to give us a substitute that he was supposed to move, and we failed to move one specific interest part of that, and we'll still have all these amendments included in the substitute, but it will also add an important part for those of y'all who are in Fairfax County, and that is that it will only, the maximum that it could raise your rates would be $1. So that's a very important part that we have to put in there, so the rest of us do not have to pay for Fairfax's underground line. So that's why that it's in there.
I thank the Speaker.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no? No. The committee amendment is defeated. The clerk will report a floor amendment.
Floor amendment offered, amendment in nature of the substitute offered by Delegate Kilgore. That amendment has been distributed. It's available online, is an IHOD, and is before the body.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I explained the floor substitute. Basically what it does, it sets that maximum $1 per bill that it could actually go up to for this undergrounding program, pilot program. So I hope it be the pleasure of the House to adopt the floor substitute.
Shall the floor substitute be agreed to? All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The floor substitutes agreed to. Delegate Kilgore.
And Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, this just simply allows underground utility lines, a pilot program in Fairfax County. I hope it be the pleasure of the House to pass the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 93, noes 4.
Ayes 93, noes 4. The bill passes.
Senate Bill 1774 is a measure to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Board for Contractors, requirements for licensure, certification of automatic fire sprinkler inspectors. The bill is reported from the Committee on General Laws.
Delegate from Hanover, Delegate Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, Senate Bill 1774 creates a certification for automatic fire sprinkler inspectors and asks the board to promulgate regulations for that purpose. Current law will allow anyone with a business license to conduct these types of inspections. While I did not support the measure, I move that the bill pass.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 87, noes 12.
Ayes 87, noes 12. The bill passes.
Senate Bill 1781 is a measure to amend and reenact Section of the Code of Virginia relating to contests of certain elections, locations of proceeding to contests. The bill was reported from the Committee on Privileges and Elections.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 1781 basically changes the venue where if someone is running for office and they stated their residence was in one area, but it was actually in another district, it changes the venue for that challenge from the locality where they said they were resident to the one, from the locality where they are resident to the one that they said they were resident of, and I would move its passage.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, noes 2.
Ayes 96, noes 2. The bill passes.
All right, Mr. Speaker, there were about 7 or 8 bills that had been taken out of the block, moved to the regular, and one that was taken by temporarily. Therefore, beginning to work through those, return to page 3. Page 3 of the printed calendar. Bill before us now is Senate Bill 1090, measure to amend and reenact Section of the Code of Virginia relating to the Freedom of Information Act, Fort Monroe Authority, closed meeting exemption. The bill is reported to Committee on General Laws.
Delegate from Macosin, Delegate Hussel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 1090 is the same as House Bill 1964. Mr. Speaker, the Freedom of Information Act currently allows closed meetings for the purposes of consideration of private gifts and grants by the boards of certain public bodies, and I don't think I need to name them, Mr. Speaker. So Senate Bill 1090 would add the Fort Monroe Authority to the list of public bodies permitted to hold closed meetings for that purpose. I move passage of the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 93, noes 6.
Ayes 93, noes 6. The bill passes.
Mr. Speaker, turning to page 5 of the printed calendar, Senate Bill 1248 is before the body. It is a measure to amend the Code of Virginia relating to local stormwater management fund. The bill is reported to the Committee on County, Cities, and Towns with an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
The delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 1248 is the cognate of my House Bill 1614, which passed this body unanimously. There was just a slight difference in the wording of the bill. I've accepted, later on when Senate amendments come up, I've accepted the Senate language. It basically does the same thing, allows a locality to set up a grant fund to provide money to fix stormwater management issues. So I see no need to put these in conference, so I would move that we reject the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no? No. The committee substitute is rejected. Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we pass Senate Bill 1248.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, no 0.
Ayes 99, no 0. The bill passes.
Mr. Speaker, going to page 12 of the calendar, printed calendar. bill before us is Senate Bill 1463, which would amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to compliance with grant requirements, creation of new jobs. The bill was reported to the Committee on General Laws.
Delegate from I'm sorry. There you are. Delegate from Arlington, Delegate Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 1463 specifies that the creation of off-site or teleworking jobs for Virginia residents by a recipient company may be included in assessing compliance with job creation requirement for a grant or incentive issued by a state agency. I move passage of the bill.
Shall the bill pass?
Mr. Speaker.
Clerk will destroy the roll. Delegate from Manassas, Delegate Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I believe this bill to be well-intentioned. However, I would like to point out what I believe to be some unintended consequences in this bill. In reading the language, it reads, in assessing the compliance of a recipient company and creating new jobs as a condition of receiving or maintaining a grant or incentive, a state agency may include new jobs related to the activities of the recipient company or its affiliates in satisfying the terms of the grant or incentive at sites in the Commonwealth owned or used by the recipient company or its affiliates. Mr. Speaker, I believe that this bill, if passed, would allow state agencies to usurp the authority of this legislature when we place geographical restrictions upon these grants. Mr. Speaker, when we create these programs that are specifically for localities with high unemployment rates, or for localities in certain planning districts, or localities in, say, Southwest, this bill, if passed, would allow the executive branch to just disregard the geographical restrictions that we have placed upon those grant programs. I don't believe that is an appropriate authority to be granting to the executive branch. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I hope it will be the will of the body to reject this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Loudoun, Delegate Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I would just simply say that I would disagree with the gentleman from Prince William on his classification. That authority already exists in code. This bill simply clarifies telework jobs for Virginia residents, and by doing that actually allows people in other parts of Virginia to participate by teleworking in, for instance, something like the Amazon headquarters too. And by also making sure that we include teleworking, it reduces congestion, gives the people a chance to work from home and not have to commute. I move we pass the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, noes 2.
Ayes 96, noes 2. Someone was confused. Bill passes.
Continuing with the calendar. Same page, next bill, Senate Bill 1492 is before the body. It would amend and reenact section of the code related to the Freedom of Information Act, exclusions, proprietary records, and trade secrets, Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, reported to the Committee on General Laws.
Delegate from Middlesex, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Senate Bill 1492 excludes from FOIA any trade secrets, any financial information, and any research-related information supplied to DHCDS as part of any grant application submitted to the department if that information is harmful to the competitive position of the applicant. Mr. Speaker, I move passage of the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 95, noes 4.
Ayes 95, noes 4. The bill passes.
Turning to page 15 of the calendar, Mr. Speaker. Page 15, bill before us is Senate Bill 1592, directing the Director of Department of Small Business and Supplier Diversity to amend certain regulations related to certain small businesses. Bill is reported to the Committee on General Laws with amendments.
Delegate from Hanover, Delegate Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The committee amendments are agreed to. Delegate Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, Senate Bill 1592 as amended is a bill that would allow employers, for the purpose of counting how many employees they have, to do so using full-time equivalents versus counting employees the standard way. This would help businesses that have many part-time employees still qualify as a micro business because they would be able to count 2 part-time employees as opposed to 1 FTE. This is a good bill for those small businesses, including your catering enterprises, for example, and you would have more businesses vying for the same allocation of this pot. So, Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill pass.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 82, noes 17.
Ayes 82, noes 17. The bill passes.
Mr. Speaker, we're continuing on that same page in the printed calendar. Next up is Senate Bill 1625, bill to amend and reenact a portion of the Code of Virginia relating to the statewide fire prevention code, definition of permissible fireworks, Board of Committee on General Laws with amendment. The amendment's been agreed to and the bill has been explained.
Delegate from Powhatan, Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this bill would change the definition of permissible fireworks in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we're going from about 1 line to 8 lines. Let me just give you a little bit. Many of you may be very familiar and could define these easily, but no longer will permissible fireworks mean any sparklers, fountains, pharaohs, serpents, caps for pistols, pinwheels, commonly known as whirligigs, or spinning jennies. Here and after. Yes, I know. We're going to cross all those out. And instead, we will insert such definitions as these: crackling devices and flashers or strobes that do not emit sparks or other burning effects to a distance greater than 2 meters, and sparkling devices or other fireworks devices that do not explode or produce a report, do not travel horizontally or vertically under their own power, do not produce a continuous flame longer than 20 inches. That's what we're going to fix and put in the code. And since we've been reminded of that auspicious day 232 years ago when the Declaration was announced, I would remind you that the day before that, John Adams wrote a letter home to his wife. What did he say? What he said was, on the 4th of July, we need to celebrate with fireworks. I hope you will defeat this bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 27, noes 71.
Ayes 27, noes 71. The bill fails to pass.
Mr. Speaker, turning to page 16 of the printed calendar. Page 16, the bill before us is Senate Bill 1681. Senate Bill 1681 is a measure to amend and reenact various sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Department of General Services, surplus property, opportunity for economic development entities to purchase prior to public sale. The bill is Board of Committee on General Laws with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Botetourt, Delegate Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to. Delegate Austin.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 1681 with this substitute is identical to my bill, House Bill 2182, which passed this House 98-1. I'd ask passage of the bill.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 1.
Ayes 98, noes 1. The bill passes.
And Mr. Speaker, going to page 22, a bill had gone by temporarily. Senate Bill 1346 on the bottom of page 22 of the printed calendar is a measure to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to electric cooperatives rates. The bill was reported to the Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, House Senate Bill 1346 deals with electric cooperatives, and it sets up the parameters whereby they can petition the Commission for approval of one or more rate adjustment clauses for timely and current recovery for their generation facilities, such as hydroelectric or pump storage, and also they could adopt any other cooperative's voluntary rate program or voluntary tariff. Hope it be the pleasure of the House to pass the bill.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 94, noes 4.
Ayes 94, noes 4. The bill passes.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Roanoke City, Delegate Rasool.
Mr. Speaker, having voted on the prevailing side by which we failed to pass Senate Bill 1625, I move that we reconsider that vote.
Delegate Rasool
Page
moves
15.
that having voted on the prevailing side, the House reconsider the vote by which it failed to pass Senate Bill 1625.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the motion.
Delegate has the floor.
After that rousing success and patriotic vote, I hope you will, bipartisan vote, I hope you will not accept a motion to reconsider this measure.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the motion.
Delegate Rasool, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think there is a little bit of confusion with regards to what the bill may do on multiple sides. So I'd ask that we reconsider it so we could pass by for the day, just to ensure that everyone knows clearly what the bill actually does.
Delegate Rasool moves that having voted on the prevailing side, the House reconsider the vote by which it failed to pass SB 1625. All those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. That motion carries and the bill is reconsidered. Delegate Rasool.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we pass by for the day Senate Bill 1625.
Delegate Rasool moves to pass by for the day SB 1625. This means favor of that motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That bill is passed by for the day. Delegate from Pennsylvania County, Delegate Adams.
Mr. Speaker, having voted on the prevailing side by which we passed SB 1346, I would ask that that be reconsidered.
Could you tell me what page that is?
Speaker, page 22.
Page 22.
1346. All right. Delegate Adams moves that having voted on the prevailing side, the House reconsider the vote by which it passed SB 1346. This means favor of that motion will say aye. This meeting is opposed, no. Okay, that bill is reconsidered. Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 95, noes 4.
Ayes 95, noes 4. The bill passes.
Mr. Speaker, turning now to the category House Bills with Senate Amendments. House Bills with Senate Amendments, page 27 of the printed calendar. There are 50 House Bills with Senate Amendments in this category. Beginning with Delegate Coles, House Bill 1614, which is a measure to amend the Code of Virginia relating to a local stormwater management fund grant monies. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with a substitute, and that substitute is before the body.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1614 is the cognate of the Senate bill we just passed a little while ago. The Senate amendments are just changes in the wording. It still does the same function, which allows localities to set up a grant fund to fix stormwater management problems. And I move that we accept the Senate amendments.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 97, no 0.
Ayes 97, no 0. The Senate substitutes agreed to.
House Bill 1620 is a measure to amend and reenact 3 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the State Board of Elections, membership, appointment of commissioner elections. Bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with amendment in the nature of a substitute. That substitute is before the body.
Delegate from Westmoreland, Delegate Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1620 is the same as Senate Bill 1455. The Senate conformed my House bill into theirs, and I would ask that we reject their Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 5, noes 93.
Ayes 5, noes 93. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Bill 1626 is a measure to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to animal fighting, presumptions where cocks tethered. Measure originally passed the House January 24th, subsequently passed the Senate with a substitute, and that substitute is before the body.
Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, the Senate amendments make clear that a tethered rooster may pretty much automatically be confiscated as presumptively being utilized in cockfighting. I would ask that we accept the Senate amendments.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 80, noes 18, abstentions 1.
Ayes 80, noes 18, abstentions 1. The Senate substitutes agreed to.
Turning to page 28. Page 28, Delegate Heads, House Bill 1661 is a measure to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia relating to formation of a benefits consortium by a sponsoring association acting as a non-profit agricultural organization. Bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with the substitute. That substitute is before the body.
Delegate from Bottomside, Delegate Head.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the Senate substitute is text-wise identical to the bill as it passed the House. It just simply moves it to the appropriate section of the code. So I would ask that we would accept the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 58, noes 41.
Ayes 58, noes 41. The Senate substitutes agreed to.
House Bill 1702 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the Code relating to the Library of Virginia, disposition of official correspondence of the governor. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed the Senate with an amendment. That amendment is now before the body.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the infamous Senate clause. I move that we reject the clause.
Shall the Senate substitute, the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 97.
Ayes 0, noes 97. The Senate amendment is rejected.
Next up is House Bill 1704, which is a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia Financial Aid Award Notification. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment. That amendment is now before the body.
Delegate from Loudoun, Delegate Reed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. House Bill 1704 actually provides a standard financial aid award letter for individuals that are going to colleges here in the state of Virginia. The Senate has made a slight amendment to that changes part of the intent, so I would ask that the House reject the Senate amendment, and we'll send this to conference.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 96.
Ayes 0, noes 96. The Senate amendment is rejected.
House Bill 1730 is a measure to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to foster care security freeze on credit report. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed the Senate with an amendment, and that amendment is now before the body.
Delegate from Suffolk, Delegate Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move that we reject the Senate amendment because it is the awful clause.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 95.
Ayes 0, noes 95. The Senate amendment is rejected.
House Bill 1753 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to school buildings, electronic room partitions. The bill originally passed the House February 4th, subsequently passed the Senate with an amendment, which is before the body.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, HB 1753 ensures the safety of motorized electronic room partitions. The Senate changed the Board of Education to the Department of Education, and so I move to accept the Senate amendment.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 95, noes 0.
Ayes 95, noes 0. The Senate amendment is agreed to.
House Bill 1807 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to state share for basic aid, duration of certain cost savings agreements. Bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with a substitute. That substitute is before the body.
Delegate from Stanton, Delegate Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Senate amendment simply removes the 20-year cap on this existing cost-saving agreement between two school divisions. I would move that we accept the Senate amendments and that we pass the bill.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, noes 0. Excuse me, ayes 97, noes 0.
Ayes 97, noes 0. The Senate substitute is agreed to.
Turn to page 30 of the printed calendar, continuing House bills with Senate amendments. Next up is House Bill 1811, a measure to amend and reenact section of the Code of Virginia relating to holding handheld personal communications devices while driving a motor vehicle. Bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment, which is before the body.
Delegate from Frederick, Delegate Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask that you reject the amendment being made by the Senate. That we do have, there's a Senate version as well that we need to bring back together again, so I'd ask you reject the amendment.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 1, noes 95.
Ayes 1, noes 95. The Senate amendment is rejected.
House Bill 1814 is a measure to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to deferral of jury service, persons who have legal custody of and are responsible for the care of a child. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with a substitute, which is before the body.
Delegate from Arlington, Delegate Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1814 would simply just allow parents to seek the option for deferral of jury service rather than the exemption. The Senate put on some amendments that are just for clarification only, and that's why I asked the body to accept the Senate amendments.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 97, noes 0, abstentions 1.
Ayes 97, noes 0, abstentions 1. The Senate substitutes agreed to.
House Bill 1816 is a measure to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to physicians advertising. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment, which is before the body.
Delegate from Caroline, Delegate Orrock.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, 1826 puts in place a mechanism whereby the Board of Medicine can sanction a physician if they use the term medical marijuana in any advertisement. The Senate amendment is purely technical, and I would ask that we accept the Senate amendment.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 92, noes 5.
Ayes 92, noes 5. The Senate amendment is agreed to.
House Bill 1895 is a measure to amend and reenact several portions of the Acts of Assembly of 1958, which provided a charter for the town of Irvington in Lancaster County relating to corporate limits, town council, and mayor. The bill originally passed the House January 24th, subsequently passed Senate with amendments which are before the body.
The delegate from Westmoreland County, Delegate Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that we accept the Senate amendments that are just clarifying in nature.
Shall the Senate amendments be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, no 0.
99, no 0. The Senate amendments are agreed to.
House Bill 1913 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to subdivision ordinance sidewalks. Bill originally passed the House January 31st, subsequently passed the Senate with substitute, which is before the body.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House. House Bill 1913 was a simple bill dealing with sidewalks that had the support of all the stakeholders as it came flying out of the House and almost all the way through the Senate. And unfortunately, at the very last minute, it was amended on the Senate floor and made into a much more complicated sidewalk bill that had already been rejected by our very competent counties, cities, and towns. And therefore, I would ask that we reject the Senate amendment and get this into conference.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 99.
Ayes 0, noes 99. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Bill 1942 is a measure to amend and reenact portions of the code relating to behavioral health services, exchange of medical and mental health information and records, correctional facilities. Bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed the Senate with an amendment which is before the body.
The delegate from Albemarle, Delegate Bell.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, the Senate added an additional Senate committee to which the work group must report. I hope it will be the pleasure of the House to pass the Senate amendment and pass the bill. Thank you.
Shall the Senate amendments be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, no 0.
Ayes 98, no 0. The Senate amendments are agreed to.
On page 32 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1979 has been taken by for the day. Therefore, bill before us is House Bill 2089, which is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to sex offender and crimes against minors registry re-registration schedule. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed the Senate with amendment nature substitute, which is before the body.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2089 had a companion bill on the Senate side, and unfortunately the language that had been carefully worked on the House side was overridden by the Senate side, even though the senator had agreed that the House had done really good work and had already accepted it on his bill. Therefore, I would ask that we reject the Senate substitute and send this bill to conference to get them both in the same form.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 97.
Ayes 0, noes 97. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Bill 2140 has been taken by for the day. Therefore, at the bottom of page 32 of the printed calendar, next up is Delegate Thomas's House Bill 2141, which would amend and reenact section of the code relating to local services districts, broadband, and telecommunication services. The bill originally passed the House January 31st, subsequently passed Senate with amendments which are before the body.
Delegate from Stafford, Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the Senate side, we attempted to define what unserved would be. In working with the administration, we don't quite have the language correct, so I would ask the House to reject the Senate amendment so we can go to conference and figure that out.
Shall the Senate amendments be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 98.
Ayes 0, noes 98. The Senate amendments are rejected.
House Bill 2143 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to airbags. manufacturer, importation, sales, etc. of counterfeit or non-functional airbag prohibited. Penalty. The bill was passed the House January 25th, subsequently passed the Senate with a substitute, and that substitute is before the body.
The delegate from Albemarle, Delegate Bell.
Speaker, members of the House, the two Senate amendments, one would make sure that this does not apply to vehicles used for police work, and the second would that it would not limit any civil action. Hope it will be the pleasure of the House to accept the Senate amendments and pass the bill.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 0.
Ayes 98, noes 0. The Senate substitute is agreed to.
House Bill 2169 is measured to amend and reenact section of the code relating to physician assistants licensure by endorsement. Bill originally passed the House February 4th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment, and that amendment is before the body.
Delegate from Stafford, Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the Senate side, we determined that state, or Washington, D.C., and territories could be covered by the word state. So a technical amendment I would ask the House to accept.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, noes 0.
Ayes 96, noes 0. The Senate amendment's agreed to.
House Bill 2173 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to public institutions of higher education, tuition and fee increases, public comment. The bill originally passed the House January 29th, subsequently passed Senate with a substitute, which is before the body.
Delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Miyares.
Mr. Speaker, HB 2173 deals with public comment for public institutions of higher education. There's several public comment legislation from Delegate Landis as well as Senator Chapman. I would ask that this body reject the Senate amendment so we can get this in conference and make sure we're all on the same page.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 96.
Ayes 0, noes 96. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Bill 2174 on the top of page 34 of the printed calendar is before the body. It is a measure to amend and reenact two sections of the code relating to motor vehicle dealers and manufacturers. Bill originally passed the House February 4th, subsequently passed Senate with amendments which are before the body.
The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Miyares.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 2174 deals with right of first refusal for motor vehicle dealers and manufacturers. The Senate added amendments in the committee. They were added to the House companion legislation, which was SB 1464, related to minority ownership programs. The Senate also added several floor amendments. These floor amendments provided some clarity to the measure as to its application and was agreed to by all the different parties involved, including the auto dealers, truck dealers, the AFL-CIO, and certain large manufacturers. Did you say the Farm Bureau? No Farm Bureau. No, AFL. AFL-CIO. I move the House accept the Senate amendments.
Shall the Senate amendments be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, no 0.
Ayes 98, no 0. The Senate amendments are agreed to.
House Bill 2178 is a measure to amend and reenact several portions of the Code of Virginia, all relating to the Virginia voter registration system, security plans and procedures, remedying security risks. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment which is before the body.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body. HB 2178 is a bill that ensures, or intent is to ensure, that our voting registration operations and systems are secure and safe. The Senate wanted to put a member of the House and a member of the Senate on this bill, and just one of each. And so, whether that or not that's a good idea, I will hope you would reject this amendment, and we can figure this out later this week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 98.
0, noes 98. The Senate amendment is rejected.
House Bill 2184 would amend and reenact sections of the code relating to special volunteer license for limited practice. Bill originally passed the House February 4th, subsequently passed Senate with amendment H substitute, which is before the body.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask that we accept the Senate amendments. The Senate amendments make it clear that it only deals with volunteer dentists who come into a rural area and volunteer. Hope it be the pleasure of the House to accept the Senate amendments.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, no 0.
Ayes 98, no 0. The Senate substitute's agreed to.
House Bill 2185 is a measure to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the establishment of the Virginia Rural Information Technology Apprenticeship Grant Fund and Program. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with a substitute, which is before the body.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, we just put Senate Bill 1495 in conference earlier today, so I would ask that we reject the Senate amendment so House Bill 2185 can go into conference also.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 2, noes 96.
Ayes 2, noes 96. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Bill 2192 is a measure to amend and reenact various portions of the code, all relating to the modernization of public school buildings and facilities. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed the Senate with a substitute with amendment, and the Senate substitute amendment together are both before the body.
Delegate from Montgomery, Delegate Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I move the Senate substitute with the amendment. And yes, the amendment allows for when you're building under the School Modernization Act, when you build a new school or you remodel the school, the solar facilities must be on that school property. So I guess the design of this, or the fear was this is clarifying in nature. We wanted to make sure that a school system didn't buy 500 acres and put a solar farm somewhere else. So this just clarifies that the solar facility will be on the school grounds.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, noes 1.
Ayes 96, noes 1. The Senate substitute's agreed to.
Turning to page 36, printed calendar, bill before us, HB 2247, which would amend and reenact section of the code relating to the Board of Optometry membership. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with amendment, which is before the body.
The delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to ask the body to accept the Senate amendment. All it did was take out the language that we require an optometrist just to be working 20 hours per week.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 0.
Ayes 98, noes 0. The Senate amendment is agreed to.
House Bill 2296 is a measure to amend the Code of Virginia relating to rights of persons with disabilities, procedure for certain actions, website accessibility. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with amendment H substitute, which is before the body.
Delegate from Chesapeake, Delegate Lefwich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body. The Senate substitute strips out the bank's opportunity to cure their accessibility problems, and so I would ask the body reject the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 2, noes 96.
Ayes 2, noes 96. The Senate substitute is rejected.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 2297 on page 36 of the printed calendar has been taken by for the day. Therefore, continuing House Bill Senate amendments, is Delegate Landis's House Bill 2337, bill to amend and reenact section of the Code of Virginia relating to governing boards of public institutions of higher education, tuition, and mandatory fee rates. Report. The bill originally passed the House February 4th, subsequently passed the Senate with an amendment nature substitute, which is before the body.
Delegate from Augusta, Delegate Landis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, House Bill 2337 was a transparency bill related to boards of visitors making sure students and parents and the public understood where they were going related to tuition and fee increases. The Senate basically took all that out and left just a public comment period. So, Mr. Speaker, to get this in conference, I would ask the House to reject the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 96, abstentions 1.
Ayes 0, noes 96, abstentions 1. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Bill 2339 is a measure to amend and reenact two sections of the code relating to the Department of Taxation, sharing information with the Department of Social Services. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed the Senate with a substitute, which is before the body.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So what the Senate substitute for this one does is it clarifies what tax information the Department of Social Services can actually access from the Department of Taxation, including Forms W-2 and 1099. It also tightens up what abilities the Department of Social Services will actually have to pursue. So basically at this point it just says that the Forms W-2, 1099 to facilitate the administration of public assistance or social services as defined in 63.2-100 or child support services pursuant to Chapter 19 of Title 63.2. So I move acceptance of the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 66, noes 31.
Ayes 66, noes 31. So substitutes agreed to.
House Bill 2344 is a measure to amend and reenact two sections of the code relating to the Department of Motor Vehicle Records, certain private vendors, penalty. The bill originally passed the House January 31st, subsequently passed the Senate with amendments, which those amendments are before the body.
The delegate from Albemarle, Delegate Bell.
Mr. Speaker, this is the Senate sent this back with two technical amendments, one requested by the Commissioner, the second to better conform to another part of the code. Hope it will be the pleasure of the body to accept the Senate amendments and pass the bill.
Shall the Senate amendments be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, noes 0.
Ayes 96, noes 0. The Senate amendments are agreed to.
House Bill 2457 is a measure to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the Board of Medicine retiree license. The bill originally passed the House February 4th, subsequently passed Senate with amendments, and those amendments are before the body.
Delegate from Augusta, Delegate Landis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, House Bill 2457 would, and you may recall, requires or creates, rather, a retiree license for charity care purposes. The Senate amendments bring the bill in line with other licenses that the retiree licenses that have been issued shall engage in the practice of medicine, et cetera, and that only, and we were striking only, and would just say for the purposes of providing charity care. So, Mr. Speaker, the amendments are pretty technical. Mr. Speaker, I ask the House to agree to the amendments.
Shall the Senate amendments be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, noes 0.
Ayes 99, noes 0. The Senate amendments are agreed to.
Turning to page 38 of the printed calendar. Next up is House Bill 2486, which is a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to teacher licensure reciprocity alternate routes. The bill originally passed the House February 1st, subsequently passed Senate with a substitute, which is before the body.
The delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2486 was nothing more. The only change they really made was my bill was slightly broader, had to contain the same language as Delegate Hope's bill, and they rolled them together. And so I ask that you accept the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 0.
Ayes 98, noes 0. The Senate substitute is agreed to.
Next up, House Bill 2490, which is a bill to amend and reenact various sections of the code relating to the creation of the Tech Talent Investment Program. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment nature substitute, which is before the body.
Delegate from Montgomery, Delegate Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, House Bill 2490 is the tech talent pipeline, and we have some disagreements with the Senate, so I'd hope we would reject this and put it in conference.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 4, noes 94.
Ayes 4, noes 94. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Bill 2514 is now before the body. It is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to motor vehicle safety inspection charges. Bill originally passed House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment, which is before us.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Hugo.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate amendment takes 20 cents away from the inspection station fee increase and adds it to the operation and maintenance of the state inspection program. It would be the will of the body to accept the Senate amendment.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 62, noes 37.
Ayes 62, noes 37. The Senate amendment is agreed to.
Top of page 39, Delegate Pillions, House Bill 2561, a bill to amend and reenact section of the code relating to carrier contracts with pharmacy providers, limitation on audits of pharmacy records. Bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with amendments. Those amendments are before the body.
The delegate from Washington, Delegate Pillion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Perfect. The amendment changes may to shall in a couple places. I move that we accept the Senate amendments.
Shall the Senate amendments be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 0.
Ayes 98, noes 0. The Senate amendments are agreed to.
House Bill 2569 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to family day homes zoning permits. Bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with amendment, and that amendment is before us.
The delegate from Loudoun, Delegate LaRocque.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. Mr. Speaker, this bill will allow for more efficient approval of in-home child day home facilities for persons who would provide child care services for 1 to 4 children. The Senate added a minor technical amendment, and this will make it identical to Senate Bill 1094, which passed unanimously. I move that the House agree to the Senate amendment.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 0.
Ayes 98, noes 0. The Senate amendment is agreed to.
House Bill 2589 is a measure to amend and reenact a section of the code relating to the Advisory Board on Teacher Education and Licensure membership recommendations. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed the Senate with a substitute, which is before the body.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Tran.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. This bill makes the Chancellor of the Community College System a member of the Advisory Board on Teacher Education and Licensure, and asks that the board make recommendations about licensure for people who teach dual enrollment classes in high schools. The Senate amendment is more expansive and provides an opportunity for individuals, if they meet certain requirements, to get a time-limited license. And so I move that we reject the Senate amendments and move this bill into conference. Thank you.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 1, noes 97.
Ayes 1, noes 97. The Senate is rejected.
Turning to page 40 of the printed calendar, House Bill 2597 is a measure to amend and reenact several sections of the code, all relating to child abuse and neglect, report or complaint, victim of sex trafficking, taking child victim into custody. The bill originally passed House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with amendment nature substitute, which is before the body.
Delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, the Senate substitute does two things. It adds language to require the DSSS to obtain emergency removal order if the child cannot be returned to their parent or guardian within 72 hours. Also, there are technical amendments clarifying the procedure for newly created sex trafficking assessments and refers DSS to existing options to complete a family assessment or investigation if necessary. I ask that the House accept the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 97, no 0.
Ayes 97, no 0. The Senate substitute is agreed to.
House Bill 2620 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to public institutions of higher education, governing boards, educational programs. The bill originally passed House January 29th, subsequently passed Senate with a substitute, which is before the body.
The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Miyares.
Mr. Speaker, HB 2620 is similar to several other transparency bills, including from Delegate Landis and Senator Chap Peterson. In this case, the Senate removed the language in this specific legislation that would require Board of Visitors to realize that their primary duty is to the citizens of the Commonwealth and not to the institution. I would ask this body to reject the Senate amendment and put this into conference.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 98.
Ayes 0, noes 98. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Bill 2621 is a measure to amend the Code of Virginia relating to rezoning and site plan approval, decommissioning solar energy equipment, facilities, or devices. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with amendment, and that amendment is before us.
Delegate from Hopewell, Delegate Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all they did was change the A locality to any locality. So I hope it'll be a pleasure to pass this. Just get it done.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Suffolk, Delegate Jones.
Can you explain the difference to me?
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 94, noes 3.
Ayes 94, noes 3. The Senate amendment is agreed to.
House Bill 2622 is a measure to amend and reenact multiple sections of the code relating to removal of child names and contact information of persons with a legitimate interest. The bill originally passed the House 31st January, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment, which is before the body.
The delegate from Botetourt, Delegate Austin.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 2622 is a child kinship bill, removal of a child. It changed, the Senate's amendment changed a word from shall to may. I would ask that we reject the amendment.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 1, noes 98.
Ayes 1, noes 98. The Senate amendment is rejected.
Turn to page 41 of the calendar. Next up, House Bill 2679, a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to the jurisdiction of juvenile and domestic relations district courts, findings of fact, status quo is special immigrant. Bill originally passed the House the 31st of January, subsequently passed Senate with the substitute, which is before the body.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, this bill has a Senate, sort of a companion, a bill that tries to do some of the same things in a different way. What the Senate did was conform my bill to that Senate version, but it's not quite close enough, not quite what we're trying to do, so I hope it'll be the pleasure of the body to reject the Senate amendments. We can put this bill in conference and we can work out the right way to go forward.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 1, noes 98.
Ayes 1, noes 98. The Senate amendment's rejected.
House Bill 2681 is a measure to amend and reenact section of the code relating to historical African American cemeteries, City of Hampton. The bill originally passed the House February 4th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment, which is before the body.
The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate McQuinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the House, House Bill 2681, the Senate just adds Pleasant Shed Cemetery to a list of historical cemeteries that now can receive funding for perpetual care. I hope it be the pleasure of the House to accept the Senate amendment.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to?
Yes.
Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 97, noes 1.
Ayes 97, noes 1. The Senate amendment's agreed to.
Okay.
House Bill, I think I got it. House Bill 2685 is a measure to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia military survivors and
Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Delegate Montgomery, Delegate Rush.
Yeah, having voted on the prevailing side of which we passed House Bill 2681, I move we reconsider that motion.
Yeah, I got it. Delegate Rush moves, having voted on the prevailing side, the House reconsider the vote, which passed HB 2681. All those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. That motion carries. Do you want to speak to it? Shall the bill pass? Excuse me, wrong. Shall the amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, no 0.
Ayes 99, no 0. The amendment passes.
2622.
House Bill 2685, Delegate Torian's bill is before us. It would amend and reenact portions of the code relating to the Virginia Military Survivors Independence Education Program eligibility. Bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed the Senate with an amendment, which is before the body.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Torian.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask that the House reject the Senate amendment. They put the terrible clause on my bill. Thank you.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 1, noes 98.
Ayes 1, noes 98. The Senate amendment is rejected.
Turning to page 42 of the printed calendar. Next up, House Bill 2721, which would amend and reenact section of the code relating to employment of school security officers, law enforcement officers previously employed by the United States or any state or political subdivision thereof, carrying a firearm in performance of duties. The bill originally passed the House February 4th, subsequently passed Senate with a substitute, which is before the body.
The delegate from Culpeper, Delegate Freitas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, what the bill does is just remove some of the geographical boundaries that we put in there so that if you're a qualified law enforcement professional in a different state and you move it into Virginia, you can be qualified as a school security officer. What the Senate amendment does, or Senate substitute does, is add clarifying language that the administration requested, which simply says that those security officers are still subject to the same minimum requirements. I move acceptance of the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 79, noes 17.
Ayes 79, no 17. The Senate substitutes agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, delegate from Richmond, Delegate Bourne.
Speaker, having voted on the prevailing side by which we rejected the Senate amendments for House Bill 2622, I'd move that we reconsider that vote.
Bottom of page 40.
Page 40.
Bottom of page 40.
Delegate Bourne moves that having voted on the prevailing side, that is reconsider the vote by which it rejected amendments to HB 2622. All those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. That motion carries. Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to?
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate, clerk, restore the roll. Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Botetourt.
Delegate from Botetourt, Delegate Austin.
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. I ask that we reject the Senate amendments. The Senate amendments change a word from shall to may. That basically neuters the bill. So I'd ask that we reject the Senate amendments.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 2, noes 96.
Ayes 2, noes 96. The Senate amendment's rejected.
Returning to page 42 of the printed calendar, Delegate Byron's House Bill 2766 would amend and reenact a portion of the code relating to Certificate of Public Need, charity care. The bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment which is before the body.
Delegate from Bedford, Delegate Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment just exempts nursing homes from the reporting requirement. I move that we accept the Senate amendment.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 95, noes 3.
Ayes 95, noes 3. The Senate amendment's agreed to.
House Bill 2800 would direct the Commissioner of Highways to report certain data on overweight trucks. Bill originally passed the House February 5th, subsequently passed Senate with an amendment which is before the body.
Delegate from Lynchburg, Delegate Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendments to House Bill 2800 are merely technical in nature. I move that the body do accept the amendment, sir.
Shall the Senate amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 98, noes 0.
Ayes 98, noes 0. The Senate amendment's agreed to.
Sorry. Mr. Speaker, on the next category of bills, House joint resolution with Senate amendments, there are two on page 43 of the printed calendar. Bill, the resolution before us first is House Joint Resolution 615, proposing an amendment to Section 6 of Article 2 of the Constitution of Virginia and proposing amendments to the Constitution of Virginia by adding in Article 2 sections numbered 6A and 6B relating to apportionment, state and local independent redistricting commissions, criteria. The resolution was agreed to by the House February 4th, subsequently agreed to by the Senate with an amendment nature substitute. That amendment nature substitute is before the body.
Doug from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a constitutional amendment which would establish an independent redistricting commission. The House and the Senate have differing approaches, and I would ask that we reject the Senate substitute in order to get this into conference.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the substitute.
Delegate has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I ask you to accept the Senate substitute and to vote yes. While the Senate bill may not be all that many of us had hoped for over on this side, it does much, much more to take our personal political interests out of redistricting. We do not have a perfect resolution before us. If you vote to reject, you're voting for a system wherein 4 people appointed by the Speaker will draw the district for Virginians to run in in this historic House of Delegates, just 4 people. The governor would play no role. The Senate, which I'm asking you to vote for, has 8 of us and has 8 citizens drawn and selected through retired judges and picking from applicants from among the populace of Virginia to make sure that they are truly independent thinking people. The parties would be allowed to strike a couple of the, or down to, so we get to 16 people. So you would have 8 legislators and you would have 8 citizens. If you vote yes, you'll be voting for a system where 6 of those 8 would have to approve the plan that would go into effect. The governor would not be able to change the bill, but he would be able to veto the bill. So I would ask the body to accept the Senate substitute.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Speaking to the measure, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, the delegate from Fairfax knows full well that this does not commit us to a particular course of action or a particular wording. If we put this into conference, it merely is a step in the process to allow us to try to work this out, to try to find a way forward that's in the best interest of all Virginians, and therefore I would ask the members to reject the Senate substitute.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 47, noes 52, excuse me.
Ayes 47, noes 52. The Senate substitute is rejected.
House Joint Resolution 676 proposes an amendment to Section 6 of Article 10 of the Constitution of Virginia relating to personal property tax exemption, motor vehicle owned by a disabled veteran. The resolution originally was agreed to by the House February 4th, subsequently passed the Senate with a substitute, and that substitute is before the body.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Fullercorn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the Senate substitute.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you. HJ 676, Mr. Speaker, as amended, would provide that one motor vehicle of a veteran who has 100% service-connected permanent and total disability shall be exempt from state and local taxes. The amendment also provides that automobiles and pickup trucks qualify for the exemption. The constitutional amendment will create a system that mirrors the requirements and also the guidelines for real property tax exemption, which is applicable for 100% of the disabled veterans and their spouses. That said, what passed out of the Senate is different than the House, which provided a local option for this tax exemption. So I would move that we reject the Senate amendment so that we can work this out in conference.
Shall the Senate substitute be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 0, noes 97.
Ayes 0, noes 97. The Senate substitute is rejected.
Next category, Mr. Speaker, is resolutions regular calendar. Resolutions regular calendar. There are 3 of these in this category. On page 43 at the bottom, beginning with Senate Joint Resolution 278, proposing an amendment to Section 6 of Article 10 of the Constitution of Virginia relating to personal property tax exemption, motor vehicle owned by a disabled veteran. The resolution was reported to the Committee on Privileges and Elections with an amendment nature of a substitute.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Fullercorn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendments.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to. Delegate Fullercorn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the measure.
Delegate has the floor.
SJ 278 is a companion to HJ 676, which I just described, focusing around the disabled veterans with 100% service-connected disability receiving personal property tax exemption for the vehicle. We was proud to work with the JLC. This is one of their They are priorities as well as the Commissioners of the Revenue, and obviously a vote to pass this resolution is a vote in support of disabled veterans, and again is a companion to HJ 676. Hope it'll be the will of this body to pass this resolution.
Shall the resolution be adopted? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 97, noes 1.
Ayes 97, noes 1. The resolution is adopted.
Turn to page 44 of the printed calendar. Senate Joint Resolution 306 proposes an amendment to Section 6 of Article 2 of the Constitution of Virginia and proposes amendment to the Constitution of Virginia by adding in Article 2 a section numbered 6A relating to apportionment Virginia Redistricting Commission. The resolution was reported from the Committee on Privileges and Elections with a substitute, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Joint Resolution 306 is the companion resolution to 615 that we just voted on. I move the committee substitute.
Delegate from Roanoke City, Delegate Rasool.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the committee substitute.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, to piggyback off of some of the comments that the delegate from Fairfax had mentioned earlier, if we reject the committee substitute, then we are endorsing the Senate Joint Resolution 306 as it came over, which isn't perfect, but certainly makes further strides in trying to make the process a little bit more independent. So I would hope that we would reject the committee substitute and further then, should the committee substitute be adopted, reject the underlying bill.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize. My speak button isn't working. Mr. Speaker, speaking to the measure.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, just to orient everybody to what we're doing in case it's been a long day already, I would just suggest that we're all doing the opposite of what we did just a moment ago and that everyone should pay attention, and I would encourage the members of my caucus to vote yes on this measure.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no.
No!
Ayes and nays are called for. Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? Clerk will.
Ayes 51, noes 48.
Ayes 51, noes 48. The substitute is agreed to. Shall the resolution be adopted? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 51, noes 48.
Ayes 51, noes 48. The resolution is adopted.
Senate Joint Resolution 332 confirming appointments by the governor of certain persons communicated to the General Assembly January 22, 2019. The resolution was reported from the Committee on Privileges and Elections.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Joint Resolution 332 confirms appointments made by the governor, and I move its adoption.
Shall the resolution be adopted? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 99, noes 0.
Ayes 99, noes 0. The resolution is adopted.
Okay, right. Next category on today's calendar, on the printed calendar, is page 44, category of memorial resolutions laid on the Speaker's table. The memorial resolutions to be adopted en bloc are listed on pages 44 through 48 of today's printed calendar.
Does any member desire to remove a resolution from the block? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting en bloc the memorial resolutions laid on the Speaker's table is listed on pages 44 through 48 of the calendar shall rise. The resolutions are agreed to.
Next category, Mr. Speaker, commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table. The commending resolutions to be adopted en bloc are listed on pages 49 through 63 of the printed calendar, with the exception of, on page 49, the first one, HJ 918, has been taken by until Thursday, and I'm not aware at this time, Mr. Speaker, of any other resolutions being withdrawn from the block.
Okay, Scott. Does any member desire to move a resolution from the block?
Mr. Speaker, on page...
Suffolk.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
On page 54, HJR 1023, can that be removed from the block and by until Thursday?
Okay, well, let's take that separately. Okay, so we're going to remove 1023. Is that correct? From the block. Okay, the motion is to take it by till Thursday. All those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no.
And you already did 918. So you've already been taken out.
Okay. Does any member have any additional resolutions to remove from the block? Okay, all those in favor of adopting the committee resolutions laid on the Speaker's table on pages 49 through 63 of the calendar, except for HJ 918 and 1023, will say aye. All those opposed, no. The resolutions are agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, the first conference report has been received on page 69. Page 69. Page 69, Delegate Peace was the lead conferee for the conference report for SB 1420 on page 69. SB 1420 is a measure to amend and reenact several sections of the code relating to the alcoholic beverage control co-working establishment license. The conference report has been distributed. It's available online and is before the body.
Delegate from Hanover, Delegate Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, what we have before you is a bill that simply create these co-working membership-based ABC licenses. In addition, it would add the bespoke facilities, but it does remove the mixed beverage component that individuals had a concern about. So beer and wine only, limited to 2 per member. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be adopted, the report be adopted.
Shall the conference report be adopted? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 94, noes 2.
Ayes 94, noes 2. The conference report is adopted.
Mr. Speaker, with no additional conference reports being presented at this time, that would complete today's calendar.
Per House Rule 51, the House is returned to the morning hour. Does the clerk have any additional announcements or communication?
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. Today it would constitute the 4th reading of the 3 proposed, the 3 resolutions having been introduced that propose changes to House rules. The 3 are, and this would be the 4th reading for the 3, House Resolution number 274, patroned by Delegate Ayala, amending and readopting Rule 38 of the Rules of the House pertaining to immediate consideration of a Senate joint resolution ratifying amendment to the United States Constitution. On line 14 of on Rule 38, the second paragraph, line 14 of the resolution, inserts the following. A motion for immediate consideration by the House of Delegates of a Senate joint resolution ratifying a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution shall require an affirmative vote by a majority of the members of the House voting on the motion. The motion for immediate consideration of such joint resolution shall be in order and properly before the House, regardless of whether the joint resolution has been reported upon by a committee of the House. The vote on the motion for immediate consideration shall be taken by the use of electronic voting system, or if it is inoperable, by viva voce, by response to the call, the names arranged and called in alphabetical order, except that the speaker shall be called last. Upon a motion made pursuant to this rule, the mover shall be allowed 2 minutes to state the reasons for his motion, and one member opposing the motion shall be allowed 2 minutes to state his objections. Mr. Speaker, this constitutes the 4th of the 5 required readings pursuant to House Rule 81. House Resolution number 279 is patroned by Delegate Gilbert. It would amend and readopt Rule 81 of the Rules of the House of Delegates pertaining to consideration of certain proposed amendments to the Rules of the House of Delegates. Deals with the conduct of business under Rule 81 on line 27 of the resolution, or the bottom part of the last part of the second paragraph. He proposes inserting the following: and further, provided that any proposition to change or adopt a rule of the House that relates to the consideration by the House of a specific bill or resolution or a specific classification or category described or defined by a bill or resolution may only be adopted by a vote of 2/3 of the members elected. Again, that constitutes the fourth reading for House Resolution 279. Finally, Mr. Speaker, House Resolution 280 also has been introduced. That's patroned by Delegate Simon. It would amend likewise and readopt Rule 81 of the Rules of the House pertaining to the voting requirement to discharge a committee from the consideration of a resolution. Again, it would amend Rule 81 and in the middle of the first paragraph or on line 15 of the resolution itself, he proposes inserting or resolution, so that provided that a motion to discharge a committee from the consideration of a bill or resolution shall require a majority of those voting. That constitutes the the fourth reading. Fifth reading is tomorrow. Action will be on Thursday, February 21st on those three resolutions proposing changes to the rules. Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, the only meeting I'm aware of is the Committee on Courts. Is going to meet today immediately upon adjournment of the House in House Room 1 downstairs here in the Capitol. That will be for a judge certification. Courts of Justice will be meeting briefly, it sounds, in House Room 1. That is the only legislative meeting I'm aware of this afternoon. Looking ahead, therefore, to tomorrow, Wednesday, February 20th. Bright and early, 7 o'clock, the Speaker's Bible Study will be held in the 6th floor Speaker's Conference Room. The Joint Women's Health Care Caucus. Yes, sir.
I've moved that to 7:30. That's my
I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, the Bible study tomorrow will be at 7:30. I apologize. That is in the 6th floor Speaker's Conference Room. Joint Women's Health Care Caucus is meeting tomorrow at 8. It is meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow on the 3rd floor, 300B Subcommittee Room. And then, Mr. Speaker, the next meeting would be the next gathering, not a meeting, it could be a meeting. I'm talking with myself. Mr. Speaker, the Democratic Caucus is meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock. They will be in House Room 2. The Republican Caucus will meet at 9:30 or 9 o'clock. Republican caucus likewise will be meeting at 9 o'clock. Democrats in House Room 2, the Republicans in House Room 1. Change in time, obviously, for those, Mr. Speaker, that completes the announcements that I have.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m.
The delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert, moves that when the House adjourn today, adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House do now adjourn.
The delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert, moves the House do now adjourn. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The House stands adjourned until tomorrow at 10 a.m.